In this video, I'm going to be explaining the science of blue light and trying to explain and really answer the question, does blue light actually damage the eyes? And I think this is going to be an important kind of topic to discuss because so many of us, if you're like myself, you spend most of your day in front of a computer screen, or if you're not in front of a computer screen at least all day, you're spending at least some of your day on your phone, checking out things on Facebook, Instagram, maybe Twitter, or checking emails and looking at calendars. You're spending a lot of time in front of digital screens, and that's a major source of blue light. And hey, if this is the first time that we're meeting and you're just checking out the channel, I am Dr. Joseph Allen. I am a practicing doctor of optometry here in the state of Minnesota, and I actually finished my residency at the Minneapolis VA Medical Center here in Minneapolis. And then after that, I actually completed my fellowship through the American Academy of Optometry just last year in 2018. Now, I actually started this channel here, Dr. Eye Health, about a year ago, and it's really just about helping people learn more about the eyes, vision, really just kind of understanding more how the eyes work, and of course finding the best vision products that are out there, because there's a lot of confusion out on the media between what is actually a good vision product and what's not. And really, I just wanted to be a good resource for all of my viewers, anybody who's interested in learning about the eyes, taking care of the eyes, and really keeping the eyes healthy. I want to stop and just say a moment. Hi to Meg in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. Just to kind of start off, tell me how much of the day do you actually spend staring at a computer screen? I know myself at work, I'm basically in between patients. I'm always having to chart or stare at a digital screen of some kind. And then I come home, and again, I'm always checking emails, looking at my calendar, answering things on social media, trying to answer questions here on YouTube, on some of the YouTube videos. And so I spend a majority of my day in front of digital screens. And so I think for a lot of people, this is becoming more of a concern, especially for parents, for children who are spending a lot of time on computer screens. And I'm not just talking about the desktop computers, but cell phones and tablets as well, because now tablets are being introduced very early on in a lot of education here in the United States. So kind of some kind of good dates that when big publications kind of released. Now, actually, in last year, 2018, August, a Harvard Health Publishing through Harvard Medical School published a article about blue light, and it was somewhat criticized. In fact, they actually had to re-update it and change some of what they published. Now, I didn't see the original publication, but at least I heard that they had to republish it because they got criticized for some of the claims that they made. And one of the big topics, one of the reasons I wanted to cover this topic of blue light is because there's a lot of debate about what is blue light and how it affects the eyes. And so this is something for a really good topic, and just discuss the science of what's actually out there, what kind of evidence we have for how blue light in these digital screens could potentially be affecting our health. Another big publication just recently was April here of this year, and that was actually by the French ANSIS, which is their basically food, environmental, occupational health and safety board, and they basically declared it a national concern that blue light exposure from LED lights, computer screens, digital screens is at a point now where it's affecting everybody, and it's something that they need to be concerned about nationally. Now, if you're somebody who doesn't know too much about blue light or exactly what blue light is, I'm going to kind of take you back to physics class in high school where you talked about Roy G. Biv and the electromagnetic spectrum. So the electromagnetic spectrum is basically the light that we see. It's actually, there's a lot more to the electromagnetic spectrum than our eyes actually perceive. So we see the colors of the rainbow, right? Unless you have a color deficiency. The color blue is very close, just below green light, and then above violet light or purple light. And below the purple light is ultraviolet light, and that's the UV light that we get from the sun that causes things like skin damage, like sunburn, as well as potentially skin cancers. And this same UV light actually causes issues with the eyes as well. So again, actually skin cancers of the eyelid are very common. And so wearing sunglasses, that's why your eye doctor always says, hey, you should be wearing sunglasses, because it's like natural sunblock for the eyes. It's going to protect your eyelids. You can actually have a solar keratopathy, where basically you get like snow blindness, where this UV light actually will kind of burn the front surface of the eye. It's like getting sunburn on the eye. And then UV light has actually been shown to penetrate into the eye a little bit and then gets absorbed by the crystalline lens. And this high energy light can actually advance a type of cataract called a cortical cataract. Now, beyond UV light, or specifically UVA light, which is about 320 nanometers of light to about 400 nanometers of light, that's just below blue light. And then blue light is actually encompassed between 400 and 500 nanometers of light. Most sources will basically state between those two numbers. Now, again, this type of blue light you get from a lot of different sources, and it can actually reach into the eye. And that's the big concern, is that UV light, again, is filtered mostly by the cornea, the front surface of the eye. Then UV light gets blocked. The little bit that gets through is actually blocked mostly by the crystalline lens. But blue light is a major concern, mainly because the blue light can actually pass all the way through those structures and hits the back of the eye. And that's why you're even able to see the color blue, because it passes through those structures and it actually hits the retina in the back of the eye. And so where exactly is this blue light coming from, right? Certainly we know it's coming from digital screens. We were kind of mentioning that before. But the reality is most of the blue light you're exposed to in your life comes from the sun. The sun is the largest source of blue light that we have, simply purely based on energy power alone. The sun has got a tremendous amount of power. But in addition, all the lights around us in your home, at work, fluorescent lighting, the compact fluorescent light bulbs, the ones with the kind of curly, spinny Q at the top. LED lights are very popular now because they're low energy, and that includes flat screens, LED television sets, as well as your phone, tablets, computer screens. So just to start kind of off there, that's basically what we're talking about today, because we're surrounded by all these digital devices. Certainly the sun has been around for all of human history, but at least in terms of these computer screens, it's part of modern life now to be exposed around them. And if you do a lot of research, whether you're seeing things online, seeing blog posts, seeing news articles, or if you actually dig into the science, there's three main topics that you're going to see things talk about. And that is going to be how blue light can affect our sleep quality, it can contribute to eye fatigue, and the debate of how it actually affects the retinal health of the back of the eye. And those are going to be the big topics we're going to discuss this evening. So just want to stop and say hi to everybody in the chat. Thanks so much for being here. It really means a lot that you guys are watching here, or if you're just checking out on the replay. If you're liking this content already, give me a thumbs up that you like this sort of information. This is going to be a really kind of a cool, more live stream, because I'm actually going to go and cite a lot of different studies. So if you're a science person like me and you like kind of just learning as much as you can, then you're going to really like this live stream. You're going to like this video. Quick question just from I Love Life. Thank you so much for joining here. Do I think Crizal sapphire coating in combo with Eyezen lenses is a good way to combat blue light issues? Obviously, I Love Life is actually involved in eye care. She has some knowledge at Crizal sapphire and coatings, as well as Eyezen. These are actually branded lens products you can get from an optical. Crizal is very famous for having some of the highest quality anti-reflective coatings, as well as special ones like Sapphire, Prevencia. These are, again, branded names for anti-reflective coatings, which also protect or reflect some degree of blue light. Most of the anti-blue light coatings that are put on glasses only block about 20% of blue light. However, again, it does depend on brand. Eyezen lenses is more for eye fatigue, and I have a lot of patients that really benefit from Eyezen lenses or anti-fatigue lenses. Those are lenses that have a little bit of plus power that help relax the accommodative eye muscle system inside the eye. Let's actually keep on going. Let's talk a little bit more about how blue light can affect the eye. The first big topic, again, we're going to be covering sleep, eye fatigue, and potentially retinal issues. And that first topic is sleep. And I want to first just kind of review how sleep, how we even kind of get tired and fall asleep. And the big thing is the hormone melatonin. So if you've never heard of melatonin before, it's a hormone that's produced in your brain by the pineal gland, and it actually causes drowsiness, and it helps really kind of activate your sleep pattern so that you get good quality sleep at nighttime. And so this actual response to the melatonin, the big thing with light is that there are retinal cells inside the eye that have been identified, which is only about 2% of your retinal cells can actually pick up, and they're very sensitive to blue light. They are technically activated by other white light as well, but they're very sensitive to blue light. And when this retinal cell gets activated, it basically talks to your brain, to the superior colliculus and the pineal gland, that, hey, it's still daylight out, and that it tells you, hey, we don't want to release any sort of melatonin at this time. Excuse me, I'm just shutting off my phone here. So the melatonin that gets released if you're really spending a lot of time in front of a digital screen or you're outside, again, it's telling your brain, hey, don't release melatonin. It's not time for bedtime yet because the sun is still up. So when it comes down to does blue light actually cause this effect? Does it actually delay melatonin release? And there was a major study conducted, actually reported in 2015, and it was actually by the National Academy of Sciences of the United States. And they did this study by having people basically spend the night in a sleep study room. They had people just read books as a control. They had people stay up and read the same material on an ebook reader that had blue light coming off of it. And they're actually able to measure melatonin in the blood serum. And so they're actually able to tell, hey, how much melatonin is being released. And they did this repeatedly. And so they actually did this for several nights. They did it for many people. And they ultimately had this conclusion. So they concluded that they found that the use of digital devices, especially before bedtime, prolonged the time it takes to fall asleep. It delayed the circadian clock, suppresses levels of the sleep-promoting hormone melatonin. It reduces the amount and delays the timing of REM sleep. And this reduces alertness the following morning. And that is really shocking and pretty significant, because if you think about how important sleep is to your health, sleep helps your immune system, prevents you from getting sick. Sleep is important for memory, short and long-term memory, specifically REM sleep. And then if you're a student, I know for myself in college, it's like, how much could I have remembered or retained if I probably would have slept better? This is important for high school students, for all students who stay up late and aren't getting a good quality sleep. If you're staying up all night staring at a computer screen, it could be affecting your melatonin levels. And again, that could affect all of your sleep. And then to me personally, this is actually something I'm more concerned about because of memory loss as you get older. I spent a lot of my training in geriatrics and even in memory loss in senior homes, and they have found that people who sleep less than 7 hours a night are more likely to develop Alzheimer's and dementia or other types of memory loss as we get older. So again, this is a very significant concern. In that same report, they actually had a figure, and I thought it was really good because it showed you at about 6 o'clock, that's about the 1800 hour mark right at the beginning where you see the black dots coming up. That's printed book, that's the melatonin levels in printed book on average. And then you had the white dots, which shows that complete delay of melatonin being pushed back by using the readers. It was kind of like a Kindle or some sort of light emitting ebook. So it wasn't just one study. They've actually repeated this in many, many different studies. But the studies I'm including here at the bottom of the slides, I'll have the sources where they're from, including in the description below this video. I'll include all the sort of sources that I'm using. In addition, more studies actually narrowed it down and found that the range of about 460 to 480 nanometers of blue light, this is the higher wavelengths of blue light, is more effective at phase shifting the circadian clock than higher wavelengths of 555, which is technically a green color of light. So again, they were able to detect that, yes, blue light is affecting the way you sleep. It's affecting your alertness. Now, if you really dig more into it, there's a lot of other studies too that show that blue light can actually help improve alertness. So if you're somebody with seasonal affective disorder, it's been used to treat that. It's even been used to treat fatigue in patients who are coming back from any sort of traumatic brain injury, having fatigue from post-war concussions, things like that at the VA. There's some really good research on that. Just want to say hey to a couple extra people. Thank you guys so much for joining us here in the chat. I know you guys got a lot of questions, things about blue light, dry eye, glaucoma. These are all great questions, and I will continue to stay on and ask these questions again toward the end of the whole live stream. That way I can get to your questions. I want to answer them. Now, again, going back to how blue light and how it affects sleep, and then you kind of think, okay, well, what can I do? I can certainly stay off a digital device before going to bed. That I think is the easiest way. But of course, it's not an answer for everybody, because we got things to do, we got things to take care of, especially when you work on the computer. Your livelihood depends on getting work done on digital devices. I don't think they're going anywhere. So this is a big study. There's a couple different studies that have done this. They actually found that blue light blocking glasses can significantly reduce LED-induced melatonin suppression. So again, a big thing you'll see advertised online. I get advertisements on Facebook. I get them on YouTube. I get them in my Instagram for all sorts of different products, different companies advertising for blue light blocking glasses. And there's lots of different brands out there for blue light blocking glasses, but there at least is a scientific validity that these blue light blocking glasses can help reduce the melatonin suppression caused by blue light exposure. Now, if you really dig into the science again, it is that longer wavelength of light. So there are different levels of blue light protection in glasses. A lot of the companies will advertise for sleep glasses. Again, in a nice optical like the one I work at, we have a lot of good vision products. These ones here, these are the normal blue light blocking glasses that I wear at the clinic. The only reason I'm not wearing them right now, even though I'm staring at a computer screen, is because you see the reflection of the light that I'm using. But the blue light blocking glasses that I have here, they block a higher wavelength of light, which again is correlated with the suppression of melatonin. There are other types of blue light blocking glasses that are virtually clear and just have that anti-reflective on the coating. That still blocks some level of blue light, but I encourage you, whenever you're looking into buying blue light glasses, make sure you look into what wavelength of light that they're actually blocking. A lot of times the darker yellow glasses, the ones that look really dark like these ones here, that pretty much will guarantee that, I can't guarantee, but at least you know it's going to block more of those longer wavelengths of light. So that's a really kind of an extra pro tip just on when looking into those things. So we made it through sleep. Thank you guys so much. Thank you again for people hanging out there. Fritner says yellow light exists. Yes, yellow light does exist. Blue light certainly exists as well. Thank you guys so much for, again, hanging out here, checking out the video. If you're just chiming in, just let me know. How about you guys? Do you guys currently use blue light glasses? Whether you're hanging out in the chat or if you're just catching on the replay, do you currently own a pair of blue light protecting glasses or blue light blocking glasses? Again, go ahead and let me know. I personally do use them. I use them mostly during the day when I'm at work, and then when I come home, I'm putting on some sort of darker yellow sleep glasses. The only time I'm not really wearing them is when I'm doing some sort of editing on videos here, because I need to make sure that I'm using the right colors, because yellow blocking, blue blocking glasses can actually affect your color perception to some degree. Another big topic is eye fatigue, and how basically staring at the computer screen can cause all sorts of stress. Again, this is really important for anybody who's spending a lot of time in digital screens. You're focusing there, and you may experience symptoms of stress around the eyes, maybe headaches. You're going to get kind of this tension right around the eyes here, right above the brow, and that can actually lead to tension headaches even on the back of the head. But a lot of times your eyes are feeling irritated. You can get eyelid twitches. You can feel a lot of just general malaise from staring at the screen all day. You'll get really tired. Even today, I had a patient just tell me, like exactly 8 o'clock at night, they can start feeling this tired feeling around their eyes. And that's pretty significant. And it's actually something I hear from a lot of my patients. So if you've ever felt this sort of pain, we actually have a term for it, and it's called digital eye strain. Another term for it is called computer vision syndrome. And there's basically a combination of ocular and visual symptoms. It includes accommodative stress, binocular vision stress, and dry eye. So when I say accommodative stress, that has to do with your ability to focus on a near object, because most computer screens are about an arm's length away, about 22 inches away. And then think about not just computer screens, but how many of you are holding your cell phone like just a few inches from your face. And this concerns me a lot for young kids, because a lot of young kids are getting cell phones in like 3rd grade or something like that, and they got tiny arms and they just hold that screen just inches from their face. So basically that forces them and forces you to have to use your muscles inside of the eye to focus on that near object. And that muscle actually helps flex or really release the flex tension on the lens inside the eye to let you focus up close. And this can be a concern because this muscle inside the eye, the ciliary body, fatigues rather easily. And so if you're using more than half of your muscle reserve, then imagine that you're lifting 20 pounds and the max you could ever lift with your bicep was like a 40-pound dumbbell. If you're using at least half of that, you're going to feel fatigue. You're going to feel tiredness. And that depends a little bit on the theory that you subscribe to in eye care. There's other theories about how much muscle tension you need to use on that ciliary body to actually feel fatigue, but at least 50% is the most widely accepted. Then you have binocular vision stress. And by binocular vision, that means both eyes, because monocular vision is just one eye. Because you are focusing on a near object, it's not just the accommodative stress, again, focusing on a near object, but then the muscles themselves, the eyes have to work together to make sure you don't see double. So that means that whenever you look at something up close, like here I'm looking at the tip of my nose, my eyes go cross. And so again, when you're looking up close, you have to cross your eyes just a little bit. And then you have to hold that position that entire time. So if you're spending 8 hours a day staring at a computer screen for work and you're stuck in that position, that's going to, again, contribute to this sense of eye fatigue. Then dry eye, that actually comes into play because when you're looking at a close near object, whether it's a book, whether it's a computer screen, anything up close, we tend to focus more on it. And you focus so intently that you actually don't blink as often. And if you're not blinking as often, your tears on the surface of your eye are going to evaporate, and that contributes to dry eye disease. So all those things combined, again, is dry eye strain or digital eye strain or digital eye computer vision syndrome. So I just wanted to say, again, thank you guys so much for watching this. I know I'm getting some questions. I'm going to certainly see if I can get to those questions toward the end of the live stream. Please hang out. Join us for the rest of this lecture. Now, a couple other things. Especially when it comes to digital eye strain, there's a lot of the advertisers will talk about blue light glasses, not just for sleep, but they'll talk about it for eye strain. And if you really dig into all the different evidence of it, and I'll share with you, there's a lot of authors who have explored blue light filtering spectacles or glasses, and they basically found very mixed results when it comes to treating digital eye strain. There's a lot of different studies out there, really small, usually with small numbers of people, not really a large scale study of like thousands and thousands of people, but these are usually pretty small. Just a couple of them that say supportive information that I thought was actually really good in support of helping with digital eye strain. One study had 36 subjects, so again, a small study, 2 hours of computer tasks, which on average, I'd say most people can sit for 2 hours and stare at a computer. I've seen smaller studies where they only were at like 30 minutes, and I'm like, that doesn't make any difference. But 2 hours is a good amount of time. They randomized it to people without blue blocking glasses, low amounts of blue blocking, and then high amounts of blue blocking. And they did find reduced subjective symptoms of eye strain. So I thought that was pretty significant. That was a decent study. Another study had about 33 participants. Again, a very small study. Same thing, 2 hours, different types of lenses. They specifically looked at what could be causing the digital eye strain, and they focused on critical flicker frequency. And if you've never heard of critical flicker frequency, if you're in eye care, you probably heard about it in a vision science course. If you know that computer screens, digital screens, they actually are not a still image. They are a single image flickering very rapidly. And they're so rapidly that I think the limit for the human attention is about 15 flickers. It has to be 15 continuous, very quick hertz, very rapid flickering, before the brain starts to notice some sort of jitteriness. You can start to kind of recognize movement. That's kind of like a pinwheel effect, where it's spinning so quick and all of a sudden you can kind of see that there's a pinwheel in it. And so they actually found that very high amounts of that flicker can actually contribute to eye fatigue. And if as you get more tired, you actually recognize this flicker more easily. And so they found that using these blue light blocking glasses reduces the flicker and therefore is associated with reduced eye fatigue. So they actually had kind of a scientific validity of why they could possibly work. But I personally have noticed in the clinic with patients that it's very subjective. Some people find that, yes, they actually feel like the lenses help, where a lot of other patients will say, they don't really notice. So I think if you haven't tried them, if you're having a lot of eye fatigue issues, certainly something to consider, especially knowing what we know about how it affects our sleep cycles. Some other just good tips for you guys about eye fatigue in general is computer or gaming glasses. Now, computer or gaming glasses are a little bit different than the blue light blocking glasses, because computer or gaming glasses often have just a little bit of plus power, kind of like the EyeZen anti-fatigue lens that we mentioned earlier. They have a little bit of plus power in them, so it actually helps relieve the eye muscles inside the eye. And then some of them actually have types of prism built into the glasses, which actually help correct for the convergence of how your binocular system works. And so both of those combined, I've noticed myself when I wear more computer or gaming glasses, I feel much less eye strain when on a digital device or something up close like a computer screen. The other term or other tip is the 20-20-20 rule. That one is basically spending for every 20 minutes of near tasks on the computer, on a keyboard, on like a tablet or on your phone, for every 20 minutes of continuous work, take a 20-second break, looking 20 feet away, just to relieve the eye strain from your eye muscles holding that position for such a long time. I think that is fantastic that I Love Life has been educating patients daily about the 20-20-20 rule. That's awesome. I try to bring it up as often as I can, especially when people are, any of my patients are talking about eye strain. It is just a good rule of thumb to go by that, hey, you need to take a break, you know. And I think just in general, in a working environment, if you're sitting in front of a desk all day long, every hour, try to stand up and just take 5 minutes. Just take 5 minutes walking around, thinking about something. If you need to run a quick errand, just take 5 minutes, get away from your computer, take a break, all right? So again, thank you guys for being here. If you're getting a lot out of this, if you're liking hearing about this different evidence of all these different studies, give me a thumbs up. Go ahead and hit that like button for me. You know, I do actually have to, I spent quite a bit of time looking up these different articles and preparing it, because I think people actually find value, especially if you're somebody who, it just happens to be, maybe you're doing a research paper or something like that, or you're somebody who just values evidence-based medicine and evidence in the science. You know, I'm not basically just, I'm not making this stuff up. So the next big topic that we want to kind of go over is blue light and how it affects the health of the back of the eye. And if you personally have any concerns about how this could potentially be hurting the eye and causing problems in the future, let me know, because I know it's something I'm concerned about. If you're in the chat here live, or if you're just checking the replay, go ahead and comment. Let me know if it's something that concerns you. Perhaps you're in front of a computer screen and you have, you know, maybe family history of eye disease, and you're like, whoa, is this potentially causing an issue? So that's going to be our topic next, and that is how blue light and retinal health. And just to kind of bring you guys up to speed of things that I see in the clinic. So we know that staring at the sun, staring at welding arcs, or something such as staring at a solar eclipse can damage the eyes. The power of the sun and really bright lights is so powerful, it can actually burn a hole in the eye if you stare at the sun too long. So don't stare at the sun. If you stare at the sun too long, and we're talking even just a matter of seconds, it can burn a hole in the back of the eye. And in the bottom picture here, you can actually see what that looks like. And we call that solar retinopathy. And there's a little arrow pointing to this gap in the back of the eye. That's actually basically an ultrasound of the back of the eye. We call it an OCT, or an optical coherence tomography. And it actually shows a missing hole, an outer retinal hole. And that is a burn mark in the back of the eye, where the retinal RPE retinal pigment epithelium has been burnt away, and the retinal cells inside the eye are not going to be functioning well, and that person probably has a permanent blind spot in their vision and probably doesn't see 20/20 anymore from staring at the sun. So there's a lot that goes into the science of the energy of light and really the maximum of light, of what kind of power of light hits the eye and can actually cause damage. And one of the best resources I found was actually the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. That one's like, that's an incredibly tough thing to say. They actually quantitatively narrowed it down to blue light being 380 to 550 nanometers for phakic eyes. Phakic means that you have a crystalline lens inside the eye. And then even smaller wavelengths of light that include UV light for aphakic eyes, because again, the lens blocks a lot of UV light. And if you don't have a lens, like if you're born without a crystalline lens, then you can't block that UV light. So it does more damage. But this commission basically determined and categorized this damage to the eye, the damage to the eye from this blue light as being a photochemical retinal damage. And it is photochemical rather than thermal damage, because if you have like infrared light, that causes like thermal heat, and that can also basically cook the retina in the back of the eye. But again, blue light, they determined to be photochemical. So it's more of a chemical reaction. Now, knowing that in mind, and then kind of thinking, where did this all start? When did we first kind of think about blue light? When is this kind of coming into motion in terms of the science? Well, in 1992, there was a big publication called the Beaver Dam Eye Study. And they basically, this was done in Wisconsin here in the Midwest, and their goal was to recruit about 5,000 aging patients between the ages of 43 and 84 years old. They tested them in 5-year intervals for 20 years, and they basically found that those individuals who were exposed to sun more than 5 hours a day during their teens or 30s and at the present had an increased risk of retinal pigment changes and a condition called age-related macular degeneration. And they continued, and then just a moment here, for those who don't know what age-related macular degeneration is, that is a common blinding disease that people develop as they get older, after the age of 50. And it's basically where the retina cells in the central bullseye of the eye, which we call the macula, eventually burns off and dies. It doesn't necessarily, I say burns off, but basically for many reasons, that's a whole other topic, but the retina in the back of the eye starts to age faster than the rest of the body. And there's a lot of different things associated with it, but one of the big things that is associated with this aging part of the eye is oxidative stress. It's not necessarily a cause, there's a lot of debate on that, but it is associated with oxidative stress of the eye. And again, in this same study, they found that individuals who had more protection from UV light using hats, sunglasses, or from sunlight, things like hats, sunglasses, had less risk of a soft drusen, which is a protein that develops in the back of the eye that is also associated with macular degeneration, as well as pigment changes to the back of the eye. And so that study was to determine aging changes of the eye that could be related to sunlight exposure. Now, that study is an epidemiology study, so you do have to take it with a grain of salt that these are people who could be in their 70s. You're asking them, hey, do you remember, how much time you spend out in the sun during your teenage years? I'm not sure how good their memory was at that time. Everyone kind of makes good guesses. And then to ask them again, hey, how much time of those years did you spend wearing sunglasses or a hat? So, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, and that's how every epidemiology study kind of is. But it's one of the ways that we can at least curve our understanding of things that influence health. But this study specifically even identified that macular damage was more due to blue light between 400 and 480 nanometers of light rather than just UV light exposure itself. To kind of counterbalance this study, because this was a huge study, and this is something that every eye doctor will learn about in school, you get tested on it, but this is a newer one that was actually released. This was a meta-analysis in 2018, and I like to kind of present both the pro and the bad, or the two sides of the debate here, because the other side of the debate is that, hey, most studies comparing sunlight exposure and that age-related eye disease, macular degeneration. The results are inconsistent, and that it's so inconsistent that sunlight exposure may not be associated with that retinal disease at all. So there is a little bit of, again, hesitation, like, hey, is the retinal damage in the back of the eye that's occurring with things like macular degeneration, is that directly linked to exposure to sunlight? Because blue light, that high energy blue light, is a component of sunlight, and they're trying to find, hey, long term, is there any sort of correlation? So when we really narrow down and talk about just blue light, so really talk about how blue light affects the retinal health in the back of the eye, we have to start with the things like animal studies. So a major animal study, this is a really interesting study actually, and it was fairly recent. They took 18 rats, they're albino rats with, the reason they use rats is because they have a similar eye anatomy. They have an iris, they have a lens inside the eye, they have a retina, and they put rats as a control study with no light exposure. They put some exposed to white light at about 5,000 lux, which is a form of kind of way to describe the power of the light. And then they also used that same light, but except they put a blue filter that blocked 94% of the blue light. And that they actually found, their final conclusion was that the use of blue blocking filters can significantly alleviate the functional loss of retinal photoreceptive cells. So basically that study found, after they sacrificed the rats, they studied the retina, and they found the rats that were exposed to, that were protected by the blue light filter, they didn't have the same amount of retinal damage, not even near, like a significant difference. The white light caused this certain amount of retinal damage, and it's a strong light. But those that removed the blue light filter removed all the blue light, that the retinal cells didn't die off as quickly. So an animal study actually found that, hey, this blue light is a significant role in causing retinal damage in these mice or these rats. Another study, again, this time not in live rats, but took retinal cells from the mice, cultured them, and this was I'm going to talk about this study a little bit more. So this study, one of the biggest arguments, and we'll get into this, is how much energy is actually in the light. So again, that last study we talked about had 5,000 lux of light. The problem is that a lux of blue light is different from the lux of a green light, from a red light. It depends on the wavelength, the frequency and wavelength of that light. So blue light, they basically found that at 465 nanometers, at 450 lux, which is way less, had basically the equivalent power, the amount of photon energy, as green light and white light when set at a different lux power. So they adjusted the lux power, kept the exact wavelength of light the same, or from blue, green, and white. And then so it's a much less power light. It's a very weak light, shining blue light on these rat cells. They are retinal cells, not living rats. But they basically found that blue LED lights increase reactive oxygen species. So they increased basically the metabolic rate of these retinal cells, and that caused severe damage to these retinal cells, even at a low energy power exposed for 6 hours. And if you think of how much time you spend in front of a computer screen, are you sitting in front of a computer screen for 6 hours straight? I know I sure did as a kid, playing a lot of video games, and even now here at work, I spend a lot of time in front of computer screens. So if you can think that, hey, if this is a low energy source such as your computer or a tablet and you're staring at it for 6 hours, it could potentially maybe hurting the eye. Now, the cell damage they identified, again, was wavelength specific and not energy dependent. Another really interesting for this specific study is they did it again. They not only did it once, but they repeated it again because they were able to detect the reactive oxygen species, the increased metabolic rate, and then they put in an antioxidant. They thought, okay, let's take the retinal cells, we'll do it again, and we'll add an antioxidant, a very powerful one called N-acetylcysteine, which I thought was interesting because N-acetylcysteine is also a medication that we'll use actually in the clinic for people who are having basically a liver toxicity because they took too much Tylenol. We'll actually give them N-acetylcysteine. Same thing, we'll use it for people with like Sjogren's syndrome and other diseases. It's actually a medication we'll give, but it's a very potent antioxidant. And I don't recommend taking it because it smells like rotten eggs. But it is very powerful, and they found that running it again with the presence of this antioxidant, the retinal cells actually had a decreased amount of cell death. So in a way, that study at least gives some logical conclusion that maybe having some sort of vitamin supplementation or having at least antioxidants that you get from eating healthy foods like vegetables and fruit could potentially be protective against this type of retinal damage from blue light. I thought that was super interesting. Now, I know taking vitamins and things like that, a little bit beyond the scope of this talk here today, but I know some people are very interested in it, so I included this extra slide. And so eye vitamins protecting retinal damage, these are major studies. One's called the AREDS, another one's called the AREDS 2. If you want to read these studies, I'll include them again in the description of the video below if you want to read them. Those are the major landmark studies about macular degeneration and vitamin supplementation. In general, it includes vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc, lutein, and zeaxanthine. Copper is usually included in there as well because zinc prevents copper reabsorption. I also include this extra link that's an entire very descriptive, very well-written article about neuroprotective effects of lutein in the retina. And this is lutein specifically is known as basically the blue blocking vitamin inside the eye. It actually absorbs more of blue light, and it's a pigment inside the retina itself. And you really only get it from nutritional sources. Your body doesn't really make it itself. So again, if you're into the whole eye vitamin world, I include those links in the description below just for you guys. All right. Now, another study that I thought, again, I found a lot of good studies, good ones, bad ones. This study I wanted to include because the other ones we were mentioning animal studies. We did live rats. There's one on animal or rats retinal cells. This one involved human retinal pigment epithelial cells. So they actually took human cells from the retina and they tested them at different wavelengths. And these were very short wavelengths. So a 400 nanometers of light was the most significant, causing significant dose-dependent decrease in basically retinal health. Found that this blue light degraded DNA, RNA, and mitochondria. So if you're not a biology person, mitochondria is basically the fuel house generator inside the individual cells that you have in your body. That's basically where all of the energy gets made to keep your cell functioning. So in this study, again, human retinal cells, they're cultured. They're not in the human themselves, but they're cultured on a petri dish. They exposed it to 400 nanometers of light, and they found that it denatured and destroyed the mitochondria and the DNA, RNA of those cells, which, again, very significant. So not just in rats, not just in rat retinal cells, but in human retinal cells, at least done in the laboratory. So that is a huge, again, another big concern. Now, this one, for anybody who's there in the chat, or if you're catching on the replay, this next study I threw in here because it has a more of a personal note to me. And I know a lot of doctors probably don't know about this study. And when I saw this study, it like shocked me. It kind of knocked me back a little bit. This one is a melanoma study. So melanoma, kind of like skin melanoma, cancer of your skin. So melanoma actually can exist in the eye. We call it a uveal melanoma. And there's about 5 to 10% of the general population will have a mole or something called a choroidal nevi in the back of the eye. I actually have one. It's a mole in the back of the eye that most people are asymptomatic for. They don't even know they have it. So if you're somebody who hasn't had an eye exam, or you can't remember the last time you had an eye exam, you may want to get in because you could be growing this mole in the back of your eye that you can't see. It's not part of, it usually doesn't affect your vision, especially when it's small, but it can grow and has the potential to become a melanoma. And so they did this study. They took human melanoma cells, injected them, these tumor cells, injected them into albino rats. 20 albino rats. They exposed a control, the no light. They had one just exposed to blue light. And then they exposed another group to white light, but they eliminated the blue light. 100% blue light, no light, blue light getting in there to affect the rat's retina. They exposed them for 8 hours a day for 8 weeks. And they found that the blue light, the rats exposed to blue light has statistically significant proliferation of those tumor cells. That's scary to me, because if it is connected, blue light is connected to the potential growth of these tumor cells in the back of the eye, then that's again, I have this mole in the back of my eye. If that mole grows and becomes cancerous, I know, because through studies, that it can not only be a reason to remove the eye, cause for vision loss, and have the eye completely enucleated, but if it did become a tumor, a melanoma, the chance of it spreading, if it becomes, it actually spreads throughout your body, the number one place to go, it actually goes to your liver. It's kind of weird, but yeah, cancer of the eye will spread to the liver most likely. And if it spreads to the liver, you have a 99% chance of mortality within 5 years. It's really scary. It doesn't happen that often, thank goodness, but for the few people it affects, it can potentially be life-threatening. So that was a very unique study that I found. I thought I just wanted to share it. Again, this is all done in rats, not human studies, and that's probably one of the biggest arguments. So I want to kind of talk about the arguments on the other side. So we've talked about how blue light in these studies have affected retinal cells in mice in a petri dish in live rats, then in human cells, again cultured in the laboratory, and then one of the biggest arguments is that, hey, this has never been done on live humans. The retinal cells in the back of the eye have supportive structures that help prevent basically the metabolic stress of things like sunlight and blue light. And that basically prevents these diseases from forming. So that's one of the biggest arguments against blue light affecting the eye. Now, again, you try to really make more sense of it using the epidemiology studies, but again, those aren't the most reliable and they're inconsistent. So again, that's another part of the argument. Then this is probably, I'm going to share with you probably what I think is the best part about, or the best argument against blue light. And this is the best argument. And this was a study done in 2016. And this was actually done in Great Britain, and it was published in their magazine called Eye, or their journal called Eye. And they basically found, they tried to take a mathematical approach to calculate the energy from the sun, because we know that humans have been exposed to the sunlight, since the beginning of time. And they tried to calculate how much energy from the sun is going to be potentially causing damage to the back of the eye. And theoretically, if the sun has way more power than the computer screen, because the computer screen has got a very small amount of power coming from it. Their theory was that, hey, if the sun does more damage or more power to the eye, and we don't see that same retinal damage, then how could the computer screen at a low amount of power ever cause a retinal damage to the back of the eye? And basically they at least to my understanding of their paper, they were able to prove that the amount of energy coming from a blue sky, and this was done in South Britain, that the amount of energy coming from a blue sky, and they tested it, was not enough power to cause damage to the back of the eye, to the retinal cells. So in theory, they basically said that, hey, because the retinal cells in the back of the eye don't die from blue light from just looking at the sky, there's no way that a computer screen, the energy coming from a computer screen could actually damage the retina. So that is probably the best, at least theory. Now their math, I've tried to double check their math. It's a bit above me, honestly, for mathematics. If you or anybody out there watching this are kind of a genius at math, if you've taken more than a couple of years of Calc 1, Calc 2, and years of physics, I would encourage you to go back to one of my previous slides about the International Commission of Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. That's actually one of the sources that they cited that has a lot of different algorithms and limits about how much energy it takes to cause damage to the back of the eye. Specifically, I think they marked somewhere around 23 joules or kilojoules per meter squared is required to cause retinal damage. It's very tough, even for me, to try to understand their mathematics. So I can't really prove that they did it correctly, but that's one of the best, at least theories that I was able to find. So, guys, thanks so much for checking this out. Just a quick question. How many people out there, after hearing this, how many people out there are thinking that, yes, blue light could potentially hurt the back of the eye? Or are you thinking that, no, that makes sense, that, staring at the sun all day, or at least the evidence that, hey, epidemiology-wise, there's nobody really advancing in this eye disease because of staring at computer screens. What do you guys think? Of all the science that I've kind of supported or at least provided for you guys, do you guys have any thoughts so far? I'm going to try and answer a couple of questions, even some questions that are a little bit off topic here. I know Susie Q said, I'm a glaucoma suspect. I've not seen my ophthalmologist in a year. Will he repeat the tests? If your ophthalmologist has any real understanding or specialty in glaucoma, yes, your ophthalmologist will repeat at least a couple of different tests. It's pretty standard of care for glaucoma that we run multiple different tests, especially if you can sit for them. So we'd usually do a side vision test that checks your side vision. We do we at least evaluate the back of the eye, so it's likely your eye's going to be dilated. They're going to check the pressure of the eye. Oftentimes they'll use an instrument that measures the optic nerve, how many cells are healthy on the optic nerve. I have a whole video on glaucoma testing, and I think I'll try and include that in the description below just to help answer your question once this video is completely up. Thank you so much for asking that question. So another good question from Beardy: how similar are mice retinal cells to humans, though? That is an excellent question. I personally don't know exactly. I know in general they use mice for a lot of these different testings on the eyes, at least theoretically, because the animal structure of the mice is very similar in terms, again, the iris. You have mice have a small pupil. There's a crystalline lens inside their eye. They have a vitreous gel, and then they also have the same kind of similar retinal structure. So that's why they choose those. There's a lot of, again, blue-greens. I missed the part talk about the herd, very scary. Certainly. Will the eye doctor check for a mole? Yes. Whenever we look inside the eye, so going back to the ocular melanoma / the choroidal nevi, so like in the back of my eye, yes, doctors always, when I look for everybody's eyes, I look as hard as I can to make sure that everything's looking well. Oftentimes we do detect these little growths on the back of the eye. Sometimes your doctor will call them a birthmark, but there's a big difference between a birthmark and a choroidal nevi, which is more like a mole. So there's a big difference there. But oftentimes when we first establish that there is a choroidal nevi or a mole in the back of the eye, we often document it. If we can, we'll take photos of it, and then we'll usually follow up with it just to either take more photos, or we'll even kind of follow it yearly if it's very low suspect. But oftentimes we follow it back in about 6 months or maybe sooner, depending on the amount of suspicious signs it has. Again, it's a little outside the scope of this video, but I'll eventually have another video on it. But it basically, the size of the mole, how depth or how big the mole is, the location of that choroidal nevi inside the eye, if it's really close to the optic nerve, is more of a suspicious sign. So those are kind of the things that we always think about and we're trained to think about when we're identifying one of these growths in the back of the eye. So again, thank you very much for answering such great questions, guys. Is it possible for someone with refractive error to ever have normal vision again? So if you have some type of refractive error, farsightedness, nearsightedness, there is this general trend that people tend to go through life. In early life, people are usually born a little bit farsighted with some level of astigmatism. And then as you grow through the first couple of years of life, your astigmatism generally mellows out. The majority of people stay somewhat farsighted, a shallow amount of farsightedness that your eye can accommodate through or use your muscles to overpower. Then as you continue to age, you go through these different changes of the growth structure of the eye. As you go through adolescence, we tend to become more nearsighted. And so people who are really farsighted become less farsighted. Once you start getting into your 40s, you start having lose the ability to see up close. And then as you continue to age, you develop cataracts, and that cataract or the structure changes of the lens themselves changes your refractive error. So people will actually kind of sway back and forth. They can become less nearsighted, more nearsighted. It can cause a change in your vision for sure. There are certainly different refractive procedures. If you're not a fan of glasses, contact lenses, there are different ways that you can have surgery to correct for vision. These are always things to discuss with your eye doctor if you are a good candidate for those. Well, I want to say thank you guys so much for joining me here. Again, if you got something out of this, go ahead and give me a quick thumbs up. I'm going to kind of close it off here. I want to end it kind of with a good question. My eye health question of the day is, again, what do you guys think about blue light? Are you protecting your eyes from blue light? And have you tried blue light glasses? Please go ahead and comment in the section below. I'd love to hear from you guys. I'll try and answer back as many questions as I can. Otherwise, again, thank you so much for joining me. Again, I am Dr. Joseph Allen here from Dr. Eye Health. If you'd like to ever catch another new video from the channel here, go ahead and click or tap the screen up here to the side. Or if you'd like to see other cool videos from Dr. Eye Health, you can click or tap the screen down here. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you're new so you don't miss any of my future videos. I hope you have a great evening. Thanks.